This course is designed to familiarize you with the basics of commercial motor vehicle driving, as well as the qualifications, wellness, hours of service, and the whistleblower protection policies. After completing this course, you will be able to explain the requirements of Section 391.11 of the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, to include the general qualifications, physical qualifications, and what can cause a driver to be disqualified under the provisions of the FMCSR. Identify what constitutes being healthy in terms of cholesterol, blood pressure, weight and diet, exercise, alcohol and drug use, stress, and fatigue. Discuss what is required by the hours of service regulations and what information you should record on your record of duty status. Describe your rights under the regulations and how you are protected from the retaliation when filing a complaint about violations of a safety or health regulation. Your job as a professional driver comes with many responsibilities, to include the training requirements that address the following: becoming knowledgeable and compliant with all regulations contained in the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations that are applicable to the motor carrier operator, safely operating, maintaining, and complying with all motor vehicle equipment and accessories involving the performance and design criteria established by the FMCSR. Complete a comprehensive training program that meets the criteria of the FMCSR. It is important to understand the compliance with the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations is a shared responsibility among drivers and their employers. Where the driver is specifically charged with compliance, the FMCSR requires the motor carrier must be responsible for ensuring the required compliance training is conducted and all rules are strictly enforced. That is why your employer has asked that you complete this entry-level training. This course will meet the training requirements of the FMCSR with the following 4 topics. Driver Qualification Requirements, Part 391. Instruction on this topic will include medical examination procedures and medical certification, general driver qualifications, responsibilities, and disqualifications. Hours of Service, Part 395. Instruction on this topic will include basic limits, driving on duty and off duty, record of duty status, log preparation, and exceptions to the requirements. Fatigue countermeasures as a means to avoid crashes. Driver wellness. Instruction on this topic will include basic health maintenance, including diet and exercise, alcohol and drug use and abuse, stress management. Whistleblower protection, 29 CFR 1978. Instruction on this topic will include rights of an employee to question the safety practices of an employer without risk of losing his or her job or being subject to reprisals for stating a safety concern. Now that you are familiar with requirements of the FMCSR and the importance on this training, let's begin with the general qualifications of a commercial motor vehicle operator, because there is more to becoming a professional driver than just obtaining an operator's license and hitting the road. The first step is to obtain a commercial driver's license from your state of residence, which comes with its own set of requirements. But what are the additional requirements of becoming a commercial motor vehicle operator? Let's take a look. The following are the regulatory requirements you must meet in order to be qualified to operate a CMV. You must be 21 years of age. You must possess the ability to speak, read, and write English. This requirement must be met by demonstrating the ability to converse, understand traffic signs, and respond effectively to official inquiries, to include filling out all required reports. You have experience or training to safely operate the type of vehicle you drive. You pass a required physical exam and are physically qualified to drive. You have a motor vehicle operator's license. You have provided to your employer a list of any violations you have been convicted of in the last 12 months. You are not disqualified to drive a CMV. You have passed a road test. Have the ability to determine if all cargo being transported is properly loaded, distributed, and secured. Familiar with all the methods and procedures for securing cargo on the CMV you operate, goods and passengers. Now that you are familiar with the general requirements, let's take a look at the physical qualifications you must meet to qualify as a CMV driver. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations, Part 391, Subpart E, states you may not drive a CMV unless you pass a physical exam and are issued a medical examiner's certificate stating that you are physically qualified to operate a CMV. Some of the most common questions of a commercial motor vehicle operator pertaining to this requirement are questions like: who can perform this examination? Who pays for this examination? What are some of the reasons I may be unqualified physically to operate a CMV? The answer to the first question is you must be examined by a medical examiner that is listed on the National Registry of Certified Medical Examiners. The answer to the second question is normally your employer pays for the physical examination. The answer to the last question is a bit more in-depth. Let's take a closer look at the medical examination and some reasons this examination could reveal conditions preventing you from operating a CMV. A medical exam is required if you have not been medically examined and physically qualified to drive a CMV, have not had a medical exam in the last 24 months, have suffered a disease, injury, or condition that may have affected your ability to drive a CMV. Some of the reasons you can be medically unqualified to operate a CMV involve the following. You have a missing limb and have not been granted a skill performance evaluation or SPE certificate. Have an impairment of a limb or body part that interferes with your ability to perform normal tasks associated with driving a CMV and have not been granted an SPE certificate. Have diabetes requiring insulin for control. Have heart disease, which causes you chest pain, fainting, or shortness of breath. Have breathing issues like chronic asthma, emphysema, or chronic bronchitis. Have blood pressure that will likely impact your ability to drive. Have any loss of movement or feeling in any part of your body. Any sickness which is likely to cause a loss of consciousness or any loss of ability to control a CMV. Have mental issues likely to interfere with your ability to drive. Have poor vision that affects your ability to detect objects that are far away from your peripheral vision or colors. Poor hearing. Require certain medications that can adversely affect your ability to operate a CMV. Use drugs or dangerous substances. Have a current diagnosis of alcoholism. There are a few medical conditions that we have mentioned that will require a bit more explanation before we move on. These topics are vision standards, hearing standards, and hypertension. Let us begin with hypertension. A common physical condition that has an impact on your ability to operate a CMV is hypertension or high blood pressure. The FMCSR sets a blood pressure standard for drivers of CMVs as part of the overall physical qualification. If you have either, you may be required to have a review of your condition by a medical examiner more frequent than every 24 months. If you don't think hypertension is that big of a deal, take a look at the following facts. High blood pressure puts you at risk for heart disease and stroke, which are leading causes of death in the United States. About 75 million American adults, 32%, have high blood pressure. That's 1 in every 3 adults. Only about half, 54%, of people with high blood pressure have their condition under control. Another common standard that must be met as part of the physical examination is the vision standard. To meet the vision requirements, you must have a visual acuity of at least 20/40 Snellen in each eye, with or without corrective lenses. Your field of vision, or the ability to see side to side, must be at least 70 degrees in each eye. Color acuity is also very important, such as reds, green, and amber. When corrective lenses are used to meet vision qualification requirements, the corrective lenses must be used while driving. It is important to note a medical examiner, ophthalmologist, or optometrist may perform and certify vision test results. The medical examiner determines driver certification status, and any diagnosis of monocular vision is disqualifying. The last standard we will discuss is hearing. Having the ability to hear is very important, as you would probably guess, but how well must you be able to hear is a very common question. The FMCSR states you must be able to hear a forced whisper with or without the use of a hearing aid from a minimum of 5 feet away in at least one ear. A person is physically qualified to drive a CMV if that person first perceives a forced whisper voice in the better ear at not less than 5 feet with or without the use of a hearing aid, or during the testing of an audiometric device does not have an average hearing loss in the better ear greater than 40 decibels at 500 Hz, 1000 Hz, and 2000 Hz with or without a hearing aid. It is important to note drivers who use hearing aids must wear them and have them in operation at all times while driving. They must also carry a spare power source for their hearing aids. In the event you have failed a hearing test, the FMCSA has established an exemption program for drivers who cannot meet the requirements for FMCSA regulations. Section 391.41 B11, prohibiting drivers who fail the hearing test from operating interstate CMVs. We have discussed the qualifications you must possess to become a commercial motor vehicle operator, to include some of the physical standards. Now let's discuss some of the things that can disqualify, other than medical or physical conditions. Under Section 391.15 of the FMCSR, you are disqualified from driving if you are convicted, including forfeiture of bond or collateral of any of the following while operating a CMV. Driving with an alcohol concentration of 0.04% or more. Driving under the influence of alcohol as prescribed by state law. Committing a felony involving a CMV, refusing to undergo alcohol testing as prescribed by state law or local laws, operating under the influence of a controlled substance, leaving the scene of an accident involving a CMV, transporting, possessing, or unlawfully using drugs or controlled substances, texting using a handheld device. Disqualification as a driver carries some pretty serious consequences. For example, some disqualification periods can range from 6 months to up to 3 years, depending on the severity of the offense and if you have had a previous record. You may be placed out of service by law enforcement officials for certain periods of time or until a given problem is corrected. Disqualification periods for violating an out-of-service order can range between 90 days to 5 years. If this occurs and a conviction is the result of an out-of-service order, you may be disqualified indefinitely. Penalties for drivers of CMV with hazardous cargo or passengers can be more severe. If you possess a commercial driver's license, you can be disqualified for certain offenses committed in any type vehicle, work or personal, at any time. This includes off-duty time. See 383.51 of the FMCSR for complete details.